Hi everyone, my name's Emma, and today I'm going to be going over all of the books that I read during the month of September. Fall is such a great time for reading, and I was so excited to dive into all of these, and now I can't wait to share all of my thoughts on them with you today, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. The first book that I read this month was The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie O'Farrell wrote one of my favorite books that I read in 2021, which was Hamnet, which is about Shakespeare's son who died of the plague during childhood. This book, however, is about Lucrezia de' Medici. She ended up becoming the Duchess? The Duchess of Ferrara when she married Alfonso d'Este. I had really high hopes going into this one because of how much I loved Hamnet, which might have been a bit unfair because I really loved that one, and so my expectations were pretty high. It starts out with Lucrezia's childhood, and she is said to be all sorts of wild child, doesn't act anything like her siblings, she's just much wilder than the others. We're told that repeatedly, and I'm not sure that it was necessarily backed up by Lucrezia's actions, and maybe that's part of the dissonance, I don't know, but part of it felt a little bit more telly than showy. The writing style itself is really beautiful. Where I struggled with this one is the plot setup. The beginning was really interesting because you're getting to see all of the dynamics of Lucrezia's family as she's growing up, and then with this dual timeline you're getting to see some flashes of the future, and there's sort of a mystery element going on, so I was really intrigued to begin with in this story. And then as you get closer to the middle of the book, it feels like it just really kind of drags, and like I said, like the writing is beautiful, but the actual plot just started to just kind of lose me a little bit. It didn't keep me enthralled the same way that Hamnet did, because Hamnet really had wonderful characters. The character of Anne Hathaway was so beautifully written and interestingly written, with the whole magical realism element as well. This one didn't have any of that, and even though I love the Italian Renaissance period, we don't really get to see any of that because of the nature of Lucrezia's childhood and the fact that she's kept away from society mostly as she grows up. The slowness of the plot does improve towards the end of the book, and you get to see some more characters and certain artist characters as well who were really interesting to get to know, but I don't feel like it was enough to save this one for me. Like I said, I love the beginning, but then as soon as the plot kind of started to slope downwards, so did my interest in where the story was going. And so even though I absolutely love the history of these characters, if I didn't, I don't know how I would have gotten through it necessarily. So for those reasons, I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 star rating. The next book that I read in September was a quick read and sort of a necessary evil, and it was A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. This is technically book 3.5 in the A Court of Thorns and Roses fantasy series. It's filler. I mean, there's really nothing more to it than that. In this one, you get to see the main cast of characters continue to clean things up after what happened at the end of A Court of Wings and Ruin and all of that loveliness. Actually, the word lovely is probably the last word you would want to use to describe it, but I digress. I feel like A Court of Frost and Starlight would have gotten a lot more love if it had just been given to us as a set of second epilogues or bonus chapters or something like that, because the fact that this really tells no new story on its own and it still cost a whopping $16 is truly a ripoff. There's nothing to it. There's no real storyline within it. It takes place around this universe's version of Christmas or whatever winter holiday. So everyone's fretting about what to get each other for the holiday and trying to really focus on familial connections like you would around the holidays here. It does set up a couple of storylines for what I assume will be more major plot points in the final book that's come out so far, which is A Court of Silver Flames, but on its own, it really just accomplishes nothing. I have a hard time stirring up any emotions towards this book because it didn't even feel like a real book, and that's disappointing because it's over 200 pages. Like, it's a little hefty. And I've read other novellas like The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman and things like that that really tell such a compelling story in just a couple hundred pages. So I knew going into this one that it wasn't people's favorites, but I was still kind of disappointed. So for those reasons, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Even though A Court of Frost and Starlight was honestly kind of a disappointment, I decided to follow it up with another Sarah J. Maas book, and that was Crown of Midnight, which is the second book in the Throne of Glass series. I was a little nervous going into this one, especially because I read Throne of Glass this past spring and I didn't love it, which is also why I didn't continue the series until just now. But I was on a trip and I didn't want to lug a bunch of books around with me, so I just brought my Kindle and I ended up getting a copy of this through Libby, so I thought, why not? I don't know, man. I'm scared that this series just somehow isn't for me, which is sad because I really, really, really love ACOTAR so much, and I know that people love this series, so there has to be something to it, but the fact that this got such a high rating, it has like a 4.35 on Goodreads or something, and I just didn't connect with it. Basically, the plot of this one follows Selena after everything that happened in Throne of Glass. She is finally the king's champion, and so she is going around and doing his bidding, basically, as he gives her different names to dispatch names of people that he thinks are conspiring against the crown in some capacity. Then one day she ends up getting a name that she recognizes, and it's Archer Finn, who is someone that she grew up with when she was being trained as an assassin. So even though we start out the Throne of Glass series knowing that Selena Sardathian is a cold-hearted assassin who will go after whoever she needs to, that no longer applies in this book, I guess. She does not want to go after these people, and she does not want to go after Archer Finn, who she knew from her past. So she decides instead to lie to the king and say that she will look into whatever secret society Archer is accused of being a part of, so she can root out the bigger issue rather than just taking him out and not being able to gather any more information. This starts Selena down a path that feels more like filler than anything, and I know a lot of stuff happened in this book, because, it's pretty thick, but I feel like I just already can't remember most of it, even though I read it like 2.5 weeks ago. That's not to say that this book completely lacked in emotional moments. There were definitely some gut punchers in this book, but because of the rest of the plot was so flat to me, I didn't get that same, feeling that I like to get when a book really has that emotional oomph to it. So I don't know, I'm gonna give the next one a try because I know that people love it and they say that it gets better, but I'm nervous about this series. So for the reasons that I just said, I also gave this one a 3 out of 5 star rating. This month, I also read Five Survive by Holly Jackson. Holly Jackson is really well known for the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, and that's what I originally read from her. I haven't read books 2 and 3, but I really, really, really loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and so I had great feelings going into this one. Five Survive is about a group of 6 teenagers who take an old RV down on a road trip to the south somewhere because they're meeting up with some high school friends for a spring break trip. I don't know of any high schoolers in real life who really just went off on their own for a spring break trip, but it's fiction. As they're heading down to their destination, they end up getting really turned around and popping a tire, and then realize that they're in an area with absolutely no reception, no houses around to ask for help, and they are completely stranded with no cell service, no working vehicle, nothing. As the group gets out to investigate and try to figure out what's going on and to fix the tire and everything, a gunshot rings out and they see that someone has shot the RV. So they all panic, go back inside, and then they slowly realize that someone is specifically targeting them and somebody knows who they are and wants something from them, and they're trying to figure out what that is and how to make this happen so that this person doesn't harm any of them or continue to come after them. Definitely a high stakes story here, which is one of the problems that I had with it, because while the beginning was really intense and exciting, I guess, in that way, it started on such a high that it wasn't able to maintain that throughout the story. So when the beginning started out up here, then it just kind of went downhill for a lot of it until finally the ending picked up again. Also, some of the things in it were just like a little odd. Like there was a whole walkie-talkie system that didn't quite make sense. Some of the things were really obvious, and then the protagonist would take another 30 pages to realize what was actually happening. The main POV that we see is a character named Red, and I don't know if it was a personality choice or what it was. She was basically like chronically just confused by everything. And so seeing everything through her level of confusion without having any real explanation as to why she was so out to lunch was kind of just off-putting. I will say though that the ending got me. It was a good ending. I didn't see the twist coming. Sometimes I have a hard time with mystery novels, and I don't know if this is just a personal taste thing, but when a twist comes so far out of left field that you're like, literally, like, where did that come from? There was no hints guiding you toward it. It literally just came out of nowhere. It's not as compelling to me as something that was kind of threaded through the entire story instead. And this one really was one of those twists that were just like, here you go. You didn't get any information that would have led you to that conclusion, which is a bit frustrating because it feels like there are no rules and like you didn't have any chance of piecing it together yourself. So as a reader, for me personally, that's sort of frustrating and one of my pet peeves with mystery novels. Overall, this was a super fast read, and I normally like Holly Jackson's writing, but this one just didn't work so well for me. I also gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So I'm filming my commentary on this book a little bit later because I realized that I must have disliked this book so much that I fully blocked it from my mind and forgot that I even read it in the month of September. But that was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I wanted to like this one so badly. To give a little bit of context on my relationship with Ali Hazelwood's feminist novels, I really enjoyed The Love Hypothesis. It was funny, I love the characters, I love the relationship, it was sweet. I think I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it a lot. And then I read Love on the Brain, which felt like Love Hypothesis 2.0, but put them in a different science field and give the main protagonist colorful hair. I didn't like it. It was just Love Hypothesis 2.0, but also not as good somehow still. So I really didn't enjoy that one very much. And then when I read early reviews of Love Theoretically that said that it was different from the others, then it really wasn't Love Hypothesis 3.0, I had higher hopes because I was hoping to get a new relationship that I could just totally root for, and I didn't get that. So this one follows Elsie, who is an adjunct professor of physics. She has her PhD in physics, and she is totally broke and hates her position as an adjunct professor with no benefits and the types of students that she has. So she's applying for a tenure track position at MIT in their physics department. But because she's so broke from being an adjunct professor, she also does this service through an app called Faux, where people can go on and hire a fake date for work events, family events, things like that. So she does that sort of thing, and she has one client that she actually really thinks is like basically a cool dude, no romantic feelings, but they get along well, and his name is Greg. So she goes to family events with Greg, and then she meets his brother Jack, who she's convinced like totally hates her. She thinks that he thinks she's not good enough for Greg and their whole family and yada yada yada. Because, I mean, Jack just basically looks at her and says nothing and acts like a hulking brick wall of a man with no emotions whenever they run into each other, so of course you would think that he doesn't like her very much. Cut to her interview at MIT for the tenure track physics position, and wouldn't you know it, Jack is on the hiring board. The hulking brother who seemingly hates her, who also thinks that she is a children's librarian who is dating her brother. So imagine his confusion when he realizes that she is actually a adjunct professor with a PhD in physics. So he thinks she's a total liar. They continue to have academic fights about stuff, and then all of a sudden it felt like, boom, they're in love. One thing about Elsie is that she is a character who is a chronic, painful people pleaser, and so her relationship with Jack focuses more on her people pleasing tendencies than them actually like hanging out and getting to know each other and falling in love. And so instead of them going out on dates, it really just felt like Jack was therapizing her and trying to get her to get over some of her issues relating to people pleasing. So it wasn't romantic, it wasn't cute, and it honestly read like Jack was just kind of mansplaining all of Elsie's feelings to her, because apparently Jack is the only person in the world who can see how Elsie is acting like a people pleaser, and he's the only one that sees this at all and calls her out on it and is able to help her with it. So that's what their entire relationship is seemingly based on, and I just didn't love it. It wasn't the vibe. Wouldn't recommend it, honestly. I owned a physical hard copy of this book and I sold it because I just didn't feel it. That was kind of a letdown for me, but I ended up giving that one 3 out of 5 stars. Not to be overly dramatic, but I think I might have found my favorite book of the year. I am talking about the one, the only, the Once Upon a Broken Heart fantasy series. I read both Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After. The Curse for True Love, the last book in this trilogy, comes out on October 24th, and I am unbelievably excited. I talked about these books some in my UK book haul that I posted after I got back from England, because I did get these while I was in the UK. So if you'd like to see that, I will go ahead and have that video linked as well. This story follows Evangeline Fox, who is convinced that the boy she's in love with is cursed after he is now suddenly engaged to her stepsister out of nowhere. This universe has fates, who are magical beings who have certain powers and certain characteristics about them, and so Evangeline seeks out Jax, who is the Prince of Hearts and is notorious for his heartbreak and his dealings regarding love. She seeks him out to undo the curse that she believes her beloved guy is under. Of course, everyone in this world warns that you never want to make a deal with a fate, and as can be expected, things go a little bit awry, and the story continues from there. I loved Once Upon a Broken Heart. In my review on Goodreads, I said that this story is magic in book form, and I stand by that. There are so many magical descriptions of the world that they live in, the outfits they're wearing, the atmosphere, the different characters, the scenes that they're in. Honestly, if this series doesn't get turned into a movie ASAP, I'm gonna be so sad, because it is such prime book to movie material. They would have to do a good job of it because it's so beautiful and such a good story. The actual plot of this book I really enjoyed. I would say that the story in this one was maybe like a 4.25 for me, but I love the incorporation of fairy tales and ballads, and it really is just such a magical environment that I couldn't help but get swept away in it. It was so good. But then I read The Ballad of Never After, and I am forever changed. This book has got to be my new favorite book of the year. I'm not even joking. This story follows about immediately after Once Upon a Broken Heart ends. I think it's 2 days later where this book picks up. I hate to say too much about the plot of this one, because if you haven't read Once Upon a Broken Heart, it would definitely be spoilery to talk about the events of this one. But that being said, I loved this one so much more. The pacing was incredible. The relationship that you see grow between Evangeline and Jax is amazing. The magic gets even better. I love just all of the whimsy and the fairy tales and the ballad and the myths, and it's such a magical world. And I want to live there. I truly cannot stress to you enough how much I loved being in this fairy tale world. The plot twists were on point, and the ending, you guys, the ending, I finished this maybe like a week ago, and I am not recovered. I don't know if I will be able to recover until I finally get to read the last book in this trilogy, because it ended on the biggest cliffhanger. Like, when I tell you that I read the ending and I audibly gasped, my jaw was on the floor. I felt every range of human emotion in the span of 10 pages. I don't know how to stress to you enough what this ending did to me. It was incredible and infuriating and lovely, and I just, I want the last book now. I need it. I need it. I need the last book. Sorry. Okay. I had to get that rant out. It's just that rant's been brewing and I haven't had any good outlet to share it with, so I have to tell you guys exactly how I felt about the ending of this book, because wow. If it wasn't clear enough, I gave both of these top ratings. I would give 5 stars to Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I give 100 stars to The Ballad of Never After. I am not well. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up this video, there were some books that I wasn't a huge fan of, but then when I found these books that just did me in, man, they reminded me of all of the reasons that I love reading in the first place, and it was such a magical experience to get to read these. If you haven't read the series, please do yourself the favor of reading them. They're so good. There's a whole bunch of other spooky, atmospheric fall books that I plan on reading, and I can't wait to dive into those, but I don't know if anything can match up to these. I really don't. I hope you have a wonderful week of happy reading, and I'll see you next time.